Hello Dr. Topik and fellow neuroscience students. The case I'll be talking to you about today is that of the very creative and imaginative Madeline J in the Hands story. So she has 3 different conditions, mixed type cerebral palsy, congenital blindness and developmental agnosia. As for how she acquired each of these, obviously her congenital blindness was present since birth, and she developed her agnosia due to a lack of development of certain areas of the brain rather than some sort of incident that caused any sort of damage. And she was actually looked after her entire life from home, so that I think tells us it's pretty safe to assume she was developed with cerebral palsy pretty early on. When it comes to the structures of the nervous system that are involved in her developmental agnosia, so obviously she didn't really acquire any sort of damage, but usually people with acquired agnosia, you will see damage in the occipital lobe, the temporal lobe, or the parietal lobes. I think something interesting to bear in mind is that if you have any trouble remembering the functions of any of these areas, you can just refer to the Brodmann's areas within them. So, for example, that of the primary somatosensory cortex, which is made up of areas 1, 2, and 3. If you just remember that this area is responsible for processing sensations of touch and temperature and those from nociceptors and so on, you can remember one of the functions of the parietal lobe. When it comes to cerebral palsy, it's most likely that Madeline's was caused by damage to lesions, or damage to her upper motor neurons, which we know are located in the cerebral cortex and brainstem. And this will usually cause the tightness and stiffness of muscles that is associated with spastic cerebral palsy. In addition, her basal ganglia was likely to have been damaged. This is common of athetoid cerebral palsy, and it's not surprising if you consider that one of the functions of this area, one of the importances of this area, is that of starting voluntary movement. When it comes to symptoms and diagnosis, it's going to vary greatly for cerebral palsy and blindness, depending on the type, and how certain healthcare providers prefer to find the diagnosis. But when it comes to agnosia, it's pretty standard that they're going to use neurological testing and brain imaging. And I think now would obviously be a good time to explain exactly what agnosia is. So if it's pretty easy to remember if you break it down. A means without, gnosia means refers to our gnostic system, and so this is the faculty of perception and recognition. So agnosia is the inability to recognize objects, and I actually should have put there objects, places, and people even. Okay, and it doesn't mean that your sensory perception is damaged at all. You can still have, you can still feel pain, you can still feel temperature, but you're just not going to be able to use a specific sense to identify. So you can have tactile, which means you have difficulty using your hands and the sense of touch to identify objects, or you can have visual agnosia, so you can have difficulty looking at certain things and recognizing, using your visual system to recognize certain things. Some areas of ongoing research. Gene therapy seems to be a big one for congenital blindness. Cerebral palsy it seems to be really focused on developing new early detection methods, and for agnosia, it seems to be there wasn't really any sort of miraculous or impressive ongoing research in terms of agnosia. It seemed that there was a really big focus on prognosis because acquired agnosia is more commonly seen than developmental agnosia. So your prognosis is really going to determine like how bad your neuropathy is really going to determine your likelihood of regaining your gnostic system. And this really made me think and just reminded me of the importance for those interested in a career in healthcare of making sure that when we enter the healthcare world finally, we really do take with us a sense of caring and really show our patients that how much we do care and we really pay attention to them. And a quote that I thought was interesting from the introduction of the book was, "A disease is much more than a loss. The human experience and reaction is just as, if not more important." And so I think this really ties into what I'm talking about and the importance of really treating your patients as if they are your own family members. So just some food for thought for those interested in a career in healthcare. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all take care and are doing